Somewhere around 2007, a friend of mine, Kirsty Porter, loaned me a loop pedal, and as a guitarist, I was immediately drawn to the idea of laying acoustic guitar beds. I was using a nylon string guitar at the time, which was a reaction away from steel string guitar and away from the presence of steel string and electric guitar in mainstream music. So the punk in me was using nylon string guitar, and I began working with beds of nylon string guitar and then playing taonga pūoro over the top of that. Did a couple of shows by invite because I very much kind of decided that taonga pūoro was a personal journey and that it was an opportunity to return to the internalized musician that I was, the personal musician. I'd been singing to my children all of that time, but these two things were an opportunity for me to reinvest back into myself as a musician. That rock and roll and stage performance and the drive to succeed in the rock industry had kind of drawn me away from that element of that personal element of being a musician. So the taonga pūoro was an opportunity for me to be quiet at home, alone, and with my family. So in around 2007 with the loop pedal, I began performing. But I decided very early on that I was only going to do this by invite rather than by pushing my own wagon or my own agenda in regards to having a career with taonga pūoro. That was never actually for the intention. And the invites grew, and soon enough I kind of found myself wanting to do away with the guitar. I began listening to the audience actually, probably for the first time ever as a musician. Up until then, listening to the audience was something that I had shunned in regards to my own practice. I had a strong will to do just whatever it was that was required of myself. But the audience, I started receiving some very strong and very interesting feedback from the audience, which turned within me a key around what it was that I was doing and how it was affecting other people. So I found that playing guitar and playing taonga pūoro over the guitar was a little bit, at the time, was kind of a little bit like pushing a square peg into a round hole. And so I began working with the instruments and the loop pedal and working with the taonga pūoro just alone. And I kind of developed what I call, and it seems ridiculously obvious, but what I term as together alone. So I was using just the taonga pūoro, nothing else. My desire for them to collaborate with each other, and there was kind of an anthropological or an ethnomusicological element, research element to that, which was, how do the instruments work together? How do they ensemble in a way that is thought out and maybe even composed rather than improvised as a group of people who are called to the stage or up front and then suddenly just are all playing together. And so I began creating long-form compositions with the pūoro and the loop pedal. And this was also a response to the academic within me that had begun to notice that there is always plenty to talk about when it comes to taonga pūoro, and that there's always and there's never enough time to actually play. And I believe that a great deal of my learning around the instruments has actually come from letting the instruments speak and sing and letting them be played. And in the process of playing, I learn about them and they speak to me. And there's this kind of two-way dialogue. And so I really wanted to do away with that side of the brain that was about logic and the academic side, the side that was about what the instruments looked like, how they were made, their history, and the speaking of that in terms of reo, in terms of words and language and knowledge, and let the true voice and the true spirit of the instruments speak for themselves, and let audiences and let other people experience that in a relaxed and unhurried way. And so it was a very natural development. I found that, using the loop pedal, I could develop compositions very slowly and lead people into a place, an internal space where they could then fall into the music and let it do what it needed to do for them. So I was writing 40-minute, 50-minute compositions using the instruments and the loop pedal, and the audience feedback from that soon helped me to recognise that I needed to do some recording. People were asking for albums, where can I get this to take home? And so I applied for some funding with Creative New Zealand and was honoured with the largest sum that I've ever been gifted by them at the time. And I proceeded to record with 3 different people, thinking that I wanted to find the right place for this. So I worked with a man called Benny Tones, who's a Wellington producer here. He was the sound man for Electric Wire Hustle, and is a world-renowned producer. He also makes beats and that kind of thing, and so we did some recording, and he also some of those recordings he put some of his own spin on it with beats, and that became released as a project called Uanuku, which is available on Bandcamp. And I worked with a musical artist that I greatly respect. He's not really he says he's not really someone who records other people, but he relented for me, and that's Campbell Neal, who is one of New Zealand's most foremost noise musicians. Birchville Cat Motel and Our Love Will Destroy the World, and he's very much about sonics and volume, very loud, and so we recorded it at his place, and there are some of those recordings up on my SoundCloud, and I asked Steve Garden if he would record me as well, so he was the 3rd person that I worked with. And so I travelled to Auckland and worked with Steve Garden of Rattle Records, and he recorded the album that is now available on Rattle. We recorded that in a day, and then he produced it over a period of weeks and months after that. And as he produced that, he came to understand the work, and then decided that he wanted to release it on Rattle, and that was wonderful. That I was invited into that stable with that and to be in that stable with Richard Nuns and Helena Melbourne, and also other great New Zealand musicians, and so that was recorded in 2012, and it was released actually at the beginning of 2014. And since I've been involved in a number of collaborations, so taonga pūoro is one of the elements of the Renaissance. One of the responsibilities is that taonga pūoro collaborates with other types of music, other cultures, and in the process learns about itself. It extends itself, comes to terms with itself, and in the collaborations I learn about who I am as Māori, who I am as a New Zealander, I mean even who I am as a man, and as a human being, and I learn about the instruments and what they're capable of, what I'm capable of. There is that projected element that occurs where the instruments in different cultural contexts open up the discussion around what the instruments may have done traditionally. So there's been a number of collaborations in the process, and as well as a great deal of solo work.